Welcome to the 10th episode of the Hail Mary podcast. I'm A. Tobes, and I'm joined by my husband, the Toves. We're back to give our hot takes on the latest UTSA football news, talk a little UTSA basketball, and throw some Hail Mary shots downfield for our listeners to love or hate. Well, let's get started with the latest coaching news. As JJ had predicted on our year-end review episode, the situation with Coach Nix was resolved at the end of January. The outcome, for me at least, wasn't totally unexpected, given how long it took for them to come to a resolution.
Right.
The university announced that it would allow Coach Nix's contract to expire at the end of the term, due in part to the internal investigation he had been suspended for back on November 14th, among other unnamed factors. And for those of you that maybe aren't as familiar with the internal investigation, our understanding is that that was a Title IX related incident. And if you don't know what Title IX is, it is the regulation that prohibits harassment and discrimination in the workplace in a student or in a educational setting. So likely this was some sort of allegation of misconduct on his part, although obviously we don't know what the details are.
Right.
My guess would be, given the fact that this wasn't an outright termination, this was just allowing him to have the contract expire, that likely this was something that wasn't as clear cut. Maybe there was some inappropriate conduct that occurred, but it didn't really rise to the level of being, harassment per se in the legal definition, or for those of you that listen to Alamodome Audible, Jared had said he had heard that there were two different issues that had occurred there were two rumors of things that had occurred with Coach Nix, and from what he understands, both of them are true. So perhaps it was this Title IX investigation, and then there was something else that had happened, maybe unrelated to that, and where it just kind of got this feeling like where there's smoke, there's fire. So let's just go ahead and take this approach where it's not an outright termination, but it's also not an outright exoneration.
Right. And I think based on what we know, it's clear that it was going to be an uphill climb. Even though there's confidence that he might be back, that he would probably be back, I should say, it really seemed like this was going to be an uphill climb. There was maybe like at least 2 strikes against him, maybe even more than that.
Yeah.
It's not really a clear cut, hey, 3 strikes and you're out. But I mean, at the point that you're getting like a second strike and you're still in your first year, I think you've got to know it's probably not going to last.
Right. And, I know there was some, kind of back and forth discussion about how long the investigation took. That didn't necessarily surprise me, knowing that this was a Title IX investigation, because it means that it had to be investigated outside of the athletic department. And I think we've seen in other cases, particular where we had the lecturer a couple of months ago, or maybe last year, that had been arrested. She was on television for, having been a part of this drug operation, and it took the university months to resolve that. So the length of time didn't necessarily surprise me. But like you said, if there were more than 1 or 2 issues, probably they just felt like it was best to say, hey, let's just move on. Let's not call it a termination, because maybe, there wasn't enough to really do that. But this is sort of their almost passive aggressive way to move on to another person.
Right. And I believe it was JJ that actually said too, or to tweet it out, that all of the coaches' contracts were coming up. So, you're looking at all the conduct and all these other issues. You're right. It's just going to be, let's just let it expire and let's just move on.
Yeah. I think the more surprising announcement that came out after that was that rather than doing a search nationwide to replace Nix, they decided to promote both Just Lepp and Rod Wright to co-defensive coordinators. And, my guess is that was really driven more by budget constraints than that being Jeff Traylor's probably first choice. I mean, we know that the coaches did have to take pay cuts this past year due to COVID. So I'm guessing, well, and we also know that UTSA has a history of having budget constraints when it comes to salaries for football coaches.
Well, sure. Yeah.
So, my guess is that this is really more budget related than anything else. You know, and also given how close it is to National Signing Day, I wonder if there were concerns about doing a nationwide search and how that would impact either the recruits who hadn't signed yet, or maybe the ones who had signed, if they would, want to leave because there was a change being made. So, maybe they felt like this was the safe choice. It gave continuity both to the recruits and to the players that have been here rather than, them having to go through a new system potentially 2 years in a row.
I mean, I'm disappointed that we didn't do the national search, but from everything you said, it all clearly makes sense. I think you also have to look at it in the terms of if you do find somebody else, how many of the coaches are you keeping? So again, falls in line with what you're saying about the recruiting. Mm-hmm. You've already got some guys that are coming in, or you've even signed some of these guys. What point do you say Coach Lepp isn't staying? Let's just say, for instance, mm-hmm. we got a different defensive coordinator. Coach Lepp isn't going to be kept. So what happens now? So all of a sudden, I would imagine some of these kids might come up to Coach Traylor and say, "Yeah, I want to be released. Yeah, I want to be released." So, again, it makes all sense in terms of budget, in terms of what we've got going on for our recruits. So,
yeah, I mean, you would assume he would bring somebody in from the outside who would want to have the same type of defensive scheme, but I guess there's also the possibility that you could have somebody that wants to do something a little bit different, even if it is within the scheme, So at least this way, you're not looking at our current kids having to face, a change 2 years in a row as well. And then from everything I've heard, Rod Wright, he's the only holdover from the Wilson era. Apparently he is supposed to be kind of this up and coming coach. And so maybe there's a desire to want to promote him. And this is a way to do that. And then also, recognize the fact that, Lepp was really the one doing all the play calling last year at the end of the year. And while there, it wasn't perfect, it wasn't exactly what Nix would have done. He did a pretty good job overall.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that on the Rod Wright, it's also a good way to kind of continue his development. Mm-hmm. I mean, at this type of level, if he's able to go to a defensive coordinator position, even at UTSA, it really puts something on his resume to be able to go later on to, let's just say, an A&M or, an Arkansas or, mm-hmm. Another program. P5 school. He can still go in as a defensive line coach, but he can also say, look, I've also been a defensive coordinator. So there might be something that he adds to that. I'm glad you brought up that some of the struggles with Lepp because, I think for all of us, we were excited about, I think, just having that continuity. Mm-hmm. And I think there was sort of this quick backlash towards Nix. And when I say backlash, it wasn't like, people were trashing him, but it was more of a, oh, yeah, the defense really improved at the end of the year. Well, I think there was certain factors for that, right? I mean, first of all, we do have to kind of look at some of the issues that Lepp did have. That first half against UTEP, a bad offense. Mm-hmm. I mean, he wasn't really pressuring the quarterbacks at all for UTEP. He wasn't it didn't look like the defense that we had seen before. And at the time, before we even knew that Nix had been suspended, we were all wondering what's going on. Mm-hmm. So it was anti-Nix at that point. Then we went into the second half and we saw the defense that we had seen before flying around, making more plays. So, that's something you had to keep into consideration. Also, the fact that there were 3 bad teams at the end of the year, there in November that we played. And to say that we played empirically better, well, sure. I mean, we were going against the weakest part of our schedule. We've talked about it during our season review where we felt we knew that there could be we could gain some ground in terms of a record in November. So let's just keep that in mind that, yes, first of all, you've got bad teams. Second of all, you also got players that have now either returning back to the fold and you have the players that are comfortable now with the system. So it's a lot that's going on there. So, I think we just have to, keep in mind, how does Lep go forward?
Yeah. I mean, the two things, that first half of the UTEP game, he definitely said that he was more conservative, and that he, seemed like he acknowledged that and then changed his approach in the second half, which helped, obviously turn that game around. Then you had the North Texas game, which seemed to go well. But then when we got to the bowl game, there were moments back in that in the bowl game where it seemed like the play calling was coming in slow.
Right.
So, that's something else that you kind of have to keep an eye on as we look at Lep's performance for next year. I don't know if that was just kind of a one-off or not, but we really only have 3 games of history with Lep.
Correct. And I think the one other point I'd want to make sure that we all understand as well is, as much as we say, well, the defense really improved under Nix. Remember, this team went up to Provo and we hailed them for the performance they had up there. Nix was the defensive coordinator then. Mm-hmm. At UAB, Nix was the defensive coordinator. So while we're quick to kind of say, yeah, they were really good at the end, they still had a lot of really good moments near the beginning of the year. So right. I wouldn't say it goes just beyond just numbers. I think the defense played well for the most part, most of the year, as they kind of settled into to the system, and as Nix kind of settled into how he wanted to call the plays. So, it's unfortunate that we had to say bye to him, but understandable.
Yep. The one thing though that's still an open question for me is, Nix was both the defensive coordinator and the linebackers coach. And in the press release, there really was no mention about what was going to be done with the linebackers. So they didn't mention, are they promoting someone else to take care of that? Or are we going on, are we searching externally? So it's a little bit of a question for me, but hopefully, we're looking to bring somebody in from the outside, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I would like to see somebody like a good up and coming coach, maybe, hopefully Trader kind of looks in his quote unquote Rolodex, mm-hmm. and, looks for either like a guy on the Texas high school football scene that, maybe is up and coming, or maybe just a young guy. It's an analyst somewhere else that, has the opportunity, or wants the opportunity to come to UTSA and, coach linebackers. But considering how the linebackers had been over the previous years in the Wilson era, I think we really need to find a good linebackers coach.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to add to this is, I think we need to remember this moment, because this could be a moment that stunts Traylor's growth of the program. I mean, we've kind of already outlined some of the issues budget wise. We can do a national search, so it's great to promote within, but sometimes that's not necessarily the right thing. So hopefully this isn't something that we look back, a few years from now and say, wow, the budget, what could have been there?
National Signing Day is upon us. It's this Wednesday, February 3rd. This year, due to COVID, there won't be an in-person event. It'll be a virtual event on Facebook, I think is where they're streaming it for fans. Most of our recruits, it looks like, have signed early. I guess there's still a potential that we might have a couple of last-minute surprises, but what we have so far, we have 14 signed letter of intent, heavy on the JUCO transfers. As Coach Traylor had said this year, they were really looking more towards transfer portal, JUCO transfers, and those high school recruits where they had already seen the kids in person and had verified their height and so forth. We also have 5 additional hard commits that, all indication is that they'll be signing, including 2 locals, Dre Spriggs, a wide receiver, and Robert Rigsby, an offensive guard, and 4 transfers, one from Kansas, one from Kansas State, another from Tulane, and Texas A&M. So assuming that all of those hard commits sign, it looks like we'll have 6 from the San Antonio area. And I am including the kid from New Braunfels in that count.
Okay.
15 on defense and 8 on offense. Anything that kind of jumps out to you so far with our recruits?
I mean, I don't think it's like anybody spectacular, but I think the biggest thing is you kind of see what Traylor and the coaching staff have really started doing is really shaping this team. You see Eddie Lee Marburger, who's been touted so much by fans, but you see the type of quarterback he is, and you see how he's fit. We've kind of talked about that before. And you're looking at, he's really investing heavily on that offensive line. I mean, there's obviously we need some depth, and we need depth everywhere, but it's good to see him focusing on the offensive line, saying this is the type of offensive lineman that I need. Defensively, he's looking at those holes, which is linebacker position. You know, that was always sort of I would say thinner in terms of talent. But now I think we're really starting to see the right type of players there instead of, kind of mixing and matching guys. Having some secondary depth, it never hurts especially in college, because you have a lot of these kind of spread and air raid type offenses. So, I guess Marburger kind of stands out as a big recruit, but, I would like to see his jump from where he played to, UTSA. And then I think everybody else is just coming in, and it may not be as star-studded, say, as 2019 when you get your essentially franchise running back and your franchise safety in terms of Rashad Wisdom and, of course, Sincere McCormick.
Yeah, some great wide receivers, too.
Right. However, I think it's just starting to build that depth. And when you start seeing what we wanted to see from UTSA in the next 10 years, this is a great start. And I think this is encouraging to see.
Yeah, and I think you had mentioned, too, there was a recruit on here that looked like they might be better placed in the nose tackle position. Where
it was a transfer. It's the Brandon Brown from Tulane. I know it's been mentioned in other podcasts, but yeah, I saw the same thing. As soon as I saw him come up, it's going to be good to have a true nose tackle. We haven't had a true nose tackle. It's been the guys have played well, and I think it's obviously to Rod Wright's credit, as we've talked about before. But I think it's encouraging to see us starting to kind of plug those. We're running a 3-4, 3-3-5 sort of hybrid. You need that big guy to be able to kind of really plug up some of those offensive linemen, and I think he does it. Yeah.
The other thing we're still kind of waiting on is, figuring out exactly who those super seniors are that are coming back. We do know now that both Dantzler and Antonio Parks are coming back. Both of them have made announcements on Twitter.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rumors flying around that both Charles Wiley and Jalen Haynes are on campus and likely will be back. We expect, if those are truly the 4 that are coming back, we expect another 4 to 5 potentially. We've heard that they're playmakers from this past year. So, don't exactly know who they are, but we kind of ran through a list of our best guess, if you will.
That's a good way of putting it.
So, on that front, we kind of looked at Pastucci, Hunter Duplessis, Josh Otis, and then maybe Leroy Watson to add some dance moves and support on the tight end side.
From the tight end position, I think it's probably the least of our concerns, but it would be probably good for it to have him back again. That's just our guess. Pastucci and Otis would give us more depth on the line, and especially with 5 guys coming in, you really do. We had problems last year. I mean, we had to cancel one game because of it. So
yeah, and especially since he was injured for it seemed like the majority of the year, and we don't know what the injury was, but whatever it was allowed him to play special teams, but was something that kind of prohibited him from really being on the line.
Yeah, and then Hunter could possibly be back. So again, you have some consistency there, and that'll always help.
Yeah. I mean, the other good thing from our perspective is that while a lot of these schools right now are just seeing a ton of seniors hitting the transfer portal, UTSA really doesn't have a lot of players that are on the transfer portal looking to leave the program.
Good point.
Right now, we only have, 4 people that are in the portal, one being Brandon Deagle, the other Dedrick Wilson, Solomon Wise, and then the last one is Vance Valaire. Obviously kids that are looking for some playing time elsewhere. But I guess that again kind of drives home the culture that Traylor has been able to establish this year, that, the kids want to stay and he's looking to keep as many of them as he can.
Yeah. And I think everybody's just kind of rooting for Solomon Wise. I mean, he came in, I think everybody hoped that he would be really impactful. Maybe he didn't get a chance to do that, but hopefully he finds a home and, to really make an impact and really get some good playing time.
Yep.
Okay, in other football news, we got the 2021 schedule.
Yep.
So when we discussed this, we thought, we just have a little bit of fun and do way too early schedule predictions. So we're going to do a little one-loss kind of thing here, and we'll see how we end up.
All right.
That said, let me just start out by saying, when looking at the schedule, it just screams as a winnable schedule. Every single game is winnable.
Yep.
Now, things are just going to have to fall right for this team in order for them to be able to win these games. But I really felt like UTSA at a minimum is 40% chance to win these games, even some of the away games. Right. So, that said, here's how we're looking at this. The quarterback position gets solidified, and there's little to no drop-off on defense with Lepp now and Wright as the defensive coordinators.
Right.
We're not going to take into consideration any sort of injuries or anything, but we know they'll happen. We know there's going to be letdowns. So here's how we're going to go for it. Starting off. All right. With all that said, this team starts off in Champaign, Illinois. For me, Big Ten team, I just think that there's still a gap there. I see it as a close loss.
Yeah, for sure. This is a game that we're excited about. We definitely are going to be at this game if COVID allows, because our nephew attends Illinois.
That's right.
So we're really excited about going to this game. But, I agree with you. Illinois is at the bottom of the rankings when it comes to the Big Ten. But they do have a good quarterback. They do have a lot of players returning. And, unfortunately, I think this is going to be a loss for UTSA.
All right. After that, we return back to the Dome where Lamar comes into town. It's the FCS team. It's a win.
Absolutely.
All right. We stay in the Dome. We get Middle Tennessee with a return visit. Beginning of conference play, for me, it's a win because it's no Asher, no problem.
Yep. I totally agree.
All right. So then we are looking at Memphis. This one was a game that was canceled this year. And now we are going to Memphis to play there. One thing to note here is that UTSA has not had a winning, I would say above 500 record on the road since 2013. That said, is this the first win of the first away win for the Runners? For me, I struggled. It was a 50-50. I think this is going to be a little clarity, but gut reaction, it's a loss.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a loss too. While I think there potentially is more of an opportunity if we're going to pull an upset away against, a higher ranked team, I think we have a better chance of pulling the upset against Illinois than we do against Memphis, given the fact that they have continuity in terms of their their coach as well as some players. So I think this one's going to be a loss.
It's unfortunate, but then we head back to the Dome and we got UNLV for their first matchup against UTSA. Look, they weren't a very good team this past season, so I'm going to put us down as a win. I still think it'll be a closer game. I didn't say a close one, but I said a closer game just because, again, I think you have an established, G5 team, and so that puts us in a position where it's probably we're gonna have to play a little better than I think we would put it on cruise control for, say, a Lamar or something.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a tougher game, but we're at home. UNLV does not have a great record from last year. I think this is definitely a win for UTSA.
All right. So then we're now just we end our non-conference schedule and we go straight conference now. We're going to Western Kentucky. With Bailey Zappi heading there along with two of his top receivers, his offensive coordinator, Houston Baptist looked pretty good this past season. They took Tech down to the wire. My gut reaction is, it was 50-50. I'm going to say it's a close loss.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a close game, but unfortunately, I think it's a game that we're going to lose. UTSA has historically struggled on the road. Western Kentucky didn't have a great season last year, but I think with their quarterback situation being secured this year, I think they're going to be one of those teams that pulls it together now that they've got kind of their starting lineup back. And I think it's going to be a close loss.
With that, we return home to the Dome. A team that neither one of us like really have faith in when it comes to whenever we play them. It's Rice.
Mm-hmm.
It's always a close game. It's a type of rivalry type score that we get every single time. We've never blown out Rice. They've blown us out. We've never blown them out.
Right.
So with that said, I have a close win. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Rice is going to be they're always a tough opponent for us. They're in a rebuilding. They're better than their schedule. But, they have had a couple of folks leave this season. It could be a toss-up, but I'm going to go ahead and say we pull out the win because we're playing at home.
Huh, look at that. All right. Now we get to La Tech. We're going to Ruston. We have never won in Ruston. Mm-hmm. Let's put that out there right now.
Right.
For me, gut reaction, we get our first win in Ruston.
I'm going to disagree with you on this one. I think La Tech is going to be looking for revenge because they've had our number for so long. They're at home. They're going to be really motivated to get a win against UTSA. So I think it's going to go towards La Tech.
All right. In the weirdest scheduling of all, we get our second FCS opponent. We've got UTEP. So we're going out to El Paso. A win. Just, again, I don't care about UTEP. They're always a win. What about you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this should be a big win for us. Even though it's an away game, it's UTEP. They're just not in the same league with UTSA.
They're not. I think they're replacing their coordinator. So, again, yeah. FCS. Now here's where it gets interesting. We come back to the Dome, and it's Southern Miss. Gut reaction, I put down a win. But if there's ever going to be a letdown, for me, Southern Miss is it. It was a close game in Hattiesburg this past year. And so I'm not really sure, but I'm going to go with the win, though my gut is going back and forth over and over. What about you?
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be a win, but it could be, it could be tougher than we expect. I mean, Southern Miss has a new coach.
Agreed.
Last year, we played them with a depleted roster, with a coaching staff they knew that they weren't going to be there.
Right.
This year, they're going to have a new coaching staff. They've got, new guys coming in. I think they're going to have a chip on their shoulder. They're going to be playing to try to beat UTSA, but ultimately, I think UTSA is going to be the more talented team. We're going to be at home. We're going to win.
So the reason I said that this would be a letdown here for me is because this next week is UAB. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel like the runners have been putting UAB in their scope this whole time because they lost this past year. It was close. Not as close as we all wanted to see it but UAB under Bill Clark has been a standard in terms of the West Division of Conference USA. So for me, you hate to hear it, but I'm going with a loss. I know that they've lost some players, but gut reaction is I don't know that we're buttoned up yet to the point of really staying with UAB. What about you?
Yeah, this is the measuring stick game for me. UAB is a program that has a history of winning. They are going to be hungry to get that championship game this year. They've had a consistent coaching staff. I think if we pull out the win here, it is the measuring stick that Jeff Traylor is the real deal, that UTSA is about to turn the page. I don't think we should be disappointed with a loss in this game. But if we get the win, this is the wow, we have really turned the page kind of victory for UTSA.
Well said.
But at this point, I have it as a loss, but I don't think we should be disappointed in that.
With that, we end the season the way we should in a rivalry game against the emotional color team from Denton. You actually started out at North Texas.
I did.
And then all of a sudden, came to your senses and became a runner. So
That's right.
That has nothing to do with this game. However, I still see it as
more of a personal rivalry.
Yeah,
for
it
me.
is.
I'm conflicted.
But it's a win. To me, it's got to be a win from everything that's happened to that program. There's just no way that I see them being able to turn it around. And I think they will be able to keep it a game. But, still, there's just no way we can lose this game.
Yeah. Well, when I said that UAB was a measuring stick for me, North Texas is also a measuring stick. The UAB is a measuring stick. If we win it, we're about to turn the page. Things are going to go well. North Texas is the measuring stick. If we lose it, we are not as good as we think we are. We should win this game. It is an away game. It is a rivalry game, and things can always go wrong in those types of games. But, folks, if we walk away with a loss, first of all, if we walk away with a loss at Rice or North Texas, one or the other, it's okay. We're in the middle of the road. If we walk away with losses at both, we've got a lot of work to do. I'm going to put us down as a win because I have faith in our team, and I think that North Texas is in a bad position right now. Seth Luttrell's on the ropes. He's trying to, bring in new coordinators to save his job. He's got a ton of kids in the transfer portal. I think a loss here would be a bad position for the program to be in. So with that
puts my gut reaction record, way too early prediction of 8-4, 6-2 in conference, puts you at 7-5, 5-3 in conference. Clearly, we both think that this is a team that's going to go bowling. First time in program history that it does it back-to-back years.
Yep.
We're not predicting bowls, but I think we're both saying that this is going to be a good runner team.
Yeah.
And it's the team that starts making the next step. And I think you see it when we talk about the recruits, we talk about the schedule. This has got to be a year that we really start putting that foot forward and saying we are true contenders in the West Division.
Yep, absolutely. I think we should be happy if we get 6 wins. I think we should expect to come away with 7. Anything over 7 for me is just icing on the cake, and it means that UTSA is ready to take that next step, and we're on the great path.
And it'll say that you were wrong about one of the games, but that's fine. It's gut reaction. It's way too early. So
if the record is better, I'm good with that. If the record is less than 6, no, I'm not good with that.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, after all of that positivity, talking about UTSA football, let's talk about men's basketball.
Where do we start?
I don't know.
Well, let's look at it this way. This team is built as a 500 team, maybe a slightly above 500 team. Obviously, if you're wearing the Roadrunner glasses, you think that this is a championship team. It's not. It's just not what. It's not what we have on the in terms of players. So I get there's a lot of optimism with Keaton and Javon being the sort of the focal points, but I think there's issues both player wise and with Henson. Mm-hmm. So let's start off with the players. First of all, I think there's a lack of personal growth there. Numbers wise, you can say, well, Javon's numbers are down this year after essentially them being much better between his freshman and junior years. Mm-hmm. Keaton kind of actually peaked his sophomore year where he had his best numbers, and he's steadily declined. Okay. In terms of the other players, it's not like they have a huge sample size. So, I think if you're looking at your 2 stars and saying, why aren't they performing where they should? I think you have to look at some of the intangibles they have. You can look at the numbers and tell one story, but without the numbers, I don't see that Javon has gotten steadier as a player. Mm-hmm. The basketball IQ has not really improved as much as I would have hoped for a player of his quote unquote stature at this point. Mm-hmm. Keaton is the same way. They tend to play a lot of hero ball, and maybe that's just the way the team is set up. We can go into that a little bit later, but if that's the way the team is set up, they're not creating easy baskets. They fell in love with their jumper, and that's how they're taking it. And mm-hmm. The problem is you look at the numbers and they tell that story too. I believe Keaton is averaging like 3 free throws, maybe 4 this year. Same thing with Javon. That tells you they're not getting to the basket.
Mm-hmm. Not drawing fouls.
Exactly. And most of the time that they are, I see them at the end of a game when they're trying to close it out, when they're getting foul, when it's time to foul. So,
Right.
And they're not stressing a defense. So I think there's personal growth. Go back to FIU just a year ago, trying to inbound the ball after losing this big lead, and both of them kind of froze. And there was like this, I just remember that I couldn't believe the two of them had come up, and it was a simple play and they both fell apart. Like, so they're juniors. Like, it's not like we're talking about their freshman or sophomore year. So there are things like that I think we tend to just kind of scoot past, and we blame Henson on it. Whoa, why didn't he have a timeout? At what point did these guys grow up and you realize they're going to have to be able to make decisions on the court? As the leaders, quote unquote, they should be able to handle some of these situations. But I think that lends into the second problem. There is a lack of leadership.
Right.
You look back at Javon this year and last year, he was suspended to begin both seasons. That tells you already that that's a problem with your leaders. If he is the leader, there's an issue.
Right.
Other than that, I mean, who else on there could be vocal? I mean, it doesn't seem like there's anybody that fills that. They just seem to play for themselves almost. And it was notable when I was talking to you pre-podcast that, Germany had said something about after the Southern Miss game was like, the quote was something like, yeah, we played together. We really played for each other. That should be a given. You should be playing for each other the entire time. So, regardless of Henson, someone's got to be able to step up and say, get back on defense. Let's hustle. Let's do whatever. That's just what happens. And I think that role was Gio DeNicolau in Javon's first two seasons. And you see that the team actually had a 20-15 record. Javon's freshman year, 17-15 in Javon's sophomore year. You take him out, and all of a sudden this team has kind of plummeted. So you clearly see that that's where the leadership void is.
Right. I mean, most teams have to be leader-led from player-led, like player-leader-led.
Right. I mean, we've talked about it in terms of UTSA. You see Rashad on defense, and you see Frank on offense.
Right.
They're not necessarily on each team, on each side of the ball, the best player, but it's all about how you lead and how you make sure that these guys get up. We even talked about Watson during the bowl game when we saw that he said, hey, we're not doing this to the defense. Get up here. We're supporting our defense. Things like that is what is missing, I think, from the basketball team.
Right.
So, we can go back and forth on that, but let's move on to Henson. Where I think Henson has issues is that his two star players, quote unquote, have fallen in love with their jump shots. And instead of finding like a better offensive cohesive mix where he's getting them to the line, it's not working. So is he just not getting through? And I'm afraid that he's getting tuned out by them. And that's a problem, because if you have your two main guys tuned out, who else is going to be listening? The other thing is, I know you're going to cringe at this, but when you spell Henson, you got an O in there, but you got no D.
That's right.
And that's what this team is. It's got no defense. It doesn't seem like they even have the desire to play defense. They look bored on defense. They look like they're just ready for their opponent to either hit the shot or miss it so they can either potentially get the rebound or get back on offense. That's really what they want to do. And the problem,
they keep flipping back and forth between their defensive schemes. I mean, they play man sometimes, they play zone sometimes, and it's not changing the defensive scheme based on the team they're playing. Like, they'll change it up in the middle of the game, and it's almost like they're just not really sure what they want to do or, what's working. I don't know.
And I think to that, it kind of goes back to some of the personnel. I think the personnel is who they are, but I think you expected that maybe we'd have more of a banger inside. I thought Cedric Alley might be more of a physical player down low. Germany is he's just not strong enough, really. I think he needs to continue growing there in terms of getting more strength. He doesn't get pushed around down low. And then Eric Parrish, I'm not really sure what his role is. Like, he's a nice name, but offensively, he seems lost. Defensively, he's up and down. So at least in terms of that part of the roster, it's just befuddling. And so you kind of see where Henson has problems, but he's got to be able to say, look, we're going to run man, man defense here. We're going to go man to man. We'll be fine. Let's change this up so that we can throw off our opponent. However, it just seems like sometimes it's just untimely. So, certainly I think that he bears a lot of responsibility with some of these issues. But I think that we need to be fair to not only Henson. I think he's 55-45 the problem. I think the players are also part of the issue. And I think when you look at this team, I'll reiterate what I began with. This team is about a 500 team, and that's where they're at. So why do we expect otherwise?
Yeah, and realistically, I mean, I know there's fans out there on Twitter saying, hey, we should fire Henson and we should make a change. I mean, we've already talked about kind of the budget constraints when it came to what we think is the reason for the co-defensive coordinators.
Right.
I mean, honestly, I don't see them making a change right now in the middle of Henson's contract with a potential buyout. If they're going to do anything this year in terms of making a coaching change, I think it would have to be on the women's side. Because as much as we criticize the men's basketball team, the women are playing terribly. They've only won 2 games so far, and they really haven't had a successful season in years.
Yeah, it doesn't. I think the bigger problem there is it doesn't look like they're competitive, and that's more the problem. You can be losing and be competitive, but it doesn't seem like they are quite competitive, and that's a shame. I mean, all those players, they're getting scholarships. I'm sure they're trying their best, but it's just not happening. So it's a shame. I mean, I think again, going back to the men, it's everything that we hope for, but. What about Juice? Real quick about Juice, I think him and Germany are obviously the potential stars of the team, but I think you got something else that was a nice pickup.
Yeah. So Jordan Ivy Curry, the team has this ritual where at the beginning of the games they have this thing where they kind of come out and the strength coach is there and he sort of like pounds them on the chest and they high five and whatever, and they post this video before every game. And I got to tell you can go back and watch the last couple of games. Jordan Ivy Curry just looks really uncomfortable with this ritual. I mean, he's cringing. He's physically trying to protect himself from what is about to happen. And so I'm not sure if it's just this physical reaction, if he's into it, or is he really feeling uncomfortable? So Jordan Ivy Curry, if you're out there, if you're listening, because he is a Twitter follower of mine. So if you're listening to this.
Nice, humble brag.
Yeah, and you need help, just blink twice in the next video, and we'll make sure that we get you some help, all right?
Okay. I don't know about ATOs will, but...
We can't have the future of our team feeling like he's getting beat up before every game.
All right, that's fair. All right, we're going to throw a little curveball here, as normally ATOs starts this part off. This time it's me. So, before we go... all of you out there lamenting the fact that we no longer have college football, fear not, because FCS has their spring season coming up. Little note here is that Atovs actually got her MBA from Tarleton State in Stephenville. Mm-hmm. And just a further note here is that Tarleton State joined WAC over the summer as they transitioned from Division II up to FCS. So they have their first game on February 13th, and it's against someone that we actually are familiar with. It's McNeese State and one Frank Wilson. Yep. So we'll have on February 13th in Stephenville, Tarleton making their very first jump from to FCS, hosting that game, and we're going to have Frank Wilson coaching his very first game at McNeese. So with that, Atos, hit us with some Tarleton State magic.
Yeah. So for those of you that might not be familiar with the Tarleton program, like Tove said, they've been playing Division II in the Lone Star Conference for the last several years. They've had a lot of success at that level. Last year, 2019, they went 11-1. The previous year in 2018, they had 12 wins. So Tarleton's got a great history of winning at that Division II level. They have had success winning against FBS opponents in the past. In 2019, they did win when they played Stephen F. Austin. So, they're very excited about making this jump to FCS and are expected to still be competitive in terms of their rankings. They're actually ranked above McNeese overall in the FCS rankings. couple of things, for Tarleton, they've got a consistent coach. Coach Witten has been with the program a couple of times. This is actually his third time back with the program. He's been there for a number of years. Like I said, they've had a lot of success the last few years with him. They've also, have a history of really having some talented players, even though they've been at the Division II level. Last year's quarterback, Ben Holmes, graduated. He's now playing arena football. They had a player named Zamari Manning last year who was a wide receiver, made it to the NFL level, signed as a free agent with the Broncos, but he did get cut before that final roster. And they do have an active player right now in the NFL level, EJ Speed. He's a linebacker with the Indiana Colts. He was drafted in the 5th round. So, they have had this kind of history of talent, history of winning. This year, there's going to be a little bit of a question mark, again, because their quarterback did graduate. However, they were able to sign a grad transfer, ironically from Conference USA. Stephen Duncan, who played at Western Kentucky. He was a starter, I think, in either 2018 or 2019 before he had an injury. So he's got good experience, being a starter, playing at the FBS level. So he should be, a pretty good addition for them in their FCS debut. So I think this is going to be a really good matchup. Obviously, Frank is looking to come in and, set a standard with his new program, hopefully have more success than he did at UTSA. Right. Ironically, it looks like his starting quarterback is going to be Cody Orgeron, who is the son of LSU's coach, Ed Orgeron. Cody has been their starter previously. So it looks like he's going to be the starter again this year, that he'll be coming back. Tarleton has lost to McNeese the last time they played. They did play, I think it was back in 2013 or 2014. They lost 3-33. It was at McNeese. So Tarleton is going to be coming back, looking for that victory off the bat, looking for a little bit of revenge against McNeese as well. I'm really optimistic that they're going to be competitive at this level and that they can pull off the victory here. I know a lot of you are hoping that Frank Wilson has some level of success. He's welcome to have whatever success he wants after this game. But this one, I am going to be looking solidly for a win in the Tarleton camp. Again, if you're interested in watching it, it is supposed to be on ESPN Plus on February 13th. So
awesome. Be fun to watch.
Well, thanks again for joining us on the Hail Mary podcast. I'm Atoves.
And I'm the Toves.
We'll be back when we have some more to report on UTSA football in the upcoming season.
See you guys later.